What's going on, everybody? Welcome back and thanks for watching. Today we are going to be discussing why YouTube. And now you're asking yourself, Jacob, why does it always seem that every time you talk to us it's shaky and it's always in a vineyard? Well, number one, I'm actually in Napa, California doing some wine tasting vacation with my wife, so there happens to be a lot of really pretty vineyards. And it's honestly a lot prettier than my vineyard. And number two, I left my gimbal at home. So today we're talking why YouTube. And I realized why I want to discuss it is because I realized I did a video last week on why I quit my full-time job. And when I talked about it, I discussed three different things I was going to be focusing on after quitting my job. Number one was Midwest Made programming. And I really discussed that in depth in that why I quit my job video because that was the number one priority focus after I quit. The second thing I talked about was the idea of CrossFit. I can focus more on my CrossFit career. And the third thing I talked about was YouTube, which is what I'm doing now. And so I decided, you know what, I should turn it into kind of a three-part kind of video series. Like, I discussed Midwest Made and focusing on that. So I should also talk about why YouTube, which is what we're doing here today. And then I should also discuss CrossFit and can you live off it and that kind of concept. So today we are discussing why YouTube. When discussing the idea of why am I doing YouTube, it can really be broken up into three different distinct topics of discussion. Number one is creativity. Number two is the idea of having a stage or a platform to speak to people. And number three is the idea of after sports or setting yourself up for success after you're done with CrossFit. So let's discuss the first one. Number one is creativity. And so when I was younger, I was very creative. I was raised in a creative household. I was the kid out there, carving sticks and pretending that I'm a Jedi fighting off all the Sith in the world. And I loved it. And that's how I grew up, having a very creative mind. And if you've watched my previous videos, I've discussed the fact that I was homeschooled as a kid. So when you're homeschooled as a kid, there's not a whole lot of planned sports or planned activities. Like, I usually got my school done by about noon, and then I had the rest of the day to myself to, do chores or do some sports. But then sometimes there was a lot of free time where I had to come up with stuff to do, and that's where I think a lot of my creativity came from. And then as I got older, as most people get older, they tend to lose that creativity. You go to high school, you get less, you don't use it as much. You go to college, you use it even less probably. You get a full-time job or a career and you use it a lot less unless you're in a creative field. And so you kind of lose it and you don't really care about it too much. But then someone told me a long time ago, hey, you should try out YouTube and see what it's like and you'd be probably pretty good at it. So I decided about a year and a half ago to give it a shot and see what happens. And quickly realized that to do well at this, you have to be pretty creative. You have to learn how to edit. You have to learn how to film. You have to learn how to do these things. You have to have a creative mind to come up with topics to talk about. And so I really kind of found a niche in it. Like, wow, I really enjoy this. Like, it's really fun to be creative again. It's really fun to explore and create something and create some content out there for people to watch, for people to enjoy, for people to see and read, or whatever the case may be. And so that's really kind of the number one reason why I did it was I was creative as a child, and you kind of lose it as you get older. And then I found it again, like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to have a creative side, to show my creative side, to do some stuff out of the box. And so that's kind of the number one reason for why YouTube. The second reason on why YouTube is the idea of having a platform. Other social media platforms like Instagram or Facebook, they give me some ability, but if you combine the idea of creativity like I talked about and this platform of YouTube, it really opens up a lot of doors to spread whatever message I really want. So for instance, like I do a lot of videos on tips and tricks and strategies for workouts. That's one way of spreading a message and using the platform. The other idea is I can sit here and talk about why pride may not be important in the CrossFit gym or is bad in the CrossFit gym. And then I can also talk about, hey, why I quit my job and encourage others that, hey, sometimes quitting and leaving something out of your life can be really important and beneficial down the road. So that's my second reason on why YouTube is it allows me to have a platform to spread a positive reason or a positive word or just tips and strategies for CrossFit workouts. And reason number three, the final reason for why YouTube, is the idea of setting yourself up for success in the future in the sport. And so what YouTube allows me to do is the idea of creating content in the sport, whether it's talking about talking about games workouts, my memories, or talking about strategies for workouts, whatever the case may be. But it keeps me involved in the sport. So for instance, let's say in a few years from now, I decide to stop competing at CrossFit, because to be honest, I can't compete forever. At some point, I might decide to raise a family and move on, but the idea of having a channel in the sport allows me to stay involved in the sport. And so there's a lot of guys who've actually done this really well. They haven't necessarily used YouTube per se, but they've used other platforms to keep them involved in the sport. So for instance, Jason Khalipa really doesn't compete in the sport anymore. He did compete at the Rogue Invitational, but he doesn't like compete in the Open or have the goals of going Masters to the games. But he does stay relevant, very relevant, and very involved in the sport because of his affiliate ownership, speaking engagements, all sorts of things like that. He is considered like a subject matter expert in our field. Now, I'm not saying like, oh, you have a YouTube channel, so therefore you're a subject matter expert. That's not necessarily true whatsoever. But my goal is, I'm trying to create or do things in the sport, do Midwest Made. I'm trying to create a YouTube channel, these kind of things that keep me involved in the sport long after I'm done. Because you want to set yourself up for success in the sport in the future. I can't always compete. Technically, you know, I could be one bad injury away from being done competing forever. And so you want to be able to stay involved in the sport in such a way that your sponsors or people that are with you and backing you always want to be involved in your life, or always want to be behind you in your, in your back pocket, because they love what you do. They love the message you spread. They love the content you put out. They love whatever you do because you're involved in the sport. And the moment that you leave the sport and say, hey, I'm done competing, I'm going to wash my hands, I don't want anything to do with the sport, then you really lose that, right? You lose the ability to stay involved in the sport, keep sponsors, and keep people in your field of play, essentially. And so that's reason number 3 for why YouTube, is the idea of being relevant in the sport and setting yourself up for success in the future. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my 3 reasons of why YouTube. Being creative, having a platform to speak to you guys like this. And number 3, staying relevant in the sport and setting yourself up for success in the future. This is the kind of the video, like I mentioned, of why YouTube. And so the next one I'm probably going to put together is, can you live off of CrossFit? And this video and the next video and the one about I'm quitting my full-time job are all kind of a 3-part series in the idea of, okay, well, what now concept? Like, I've decided to quit, so really what now? Anyways, other than that, guys, I hope you guys appreciate watching this. I hope you guys appreciate my thoughts on this. I'm sorry for the fact that it's probably pretty shaky. I'm walking on, of course, just, tilled ground, and so it's kind of hard when you don't have a gimbal. And anyways, this is Jacob speaking to you from the middle of the vineyard in the middle of Napa, California. Everyone have a great day. We'll talk to you guys later. See ya.